Welcome to Soulful Latte podcast, a weekly conversation between two sisters to help us and our virtual friends online, like yourselves, grow in life and in faith. We're your hosts. I am Qudsiyah.
And I'm Samia.
And this is season 2.
Welcome to episode 3. This episode is about changing society. And before we started recording, Qudsiyah, I was loudly wondering why we started to choose this topic for this episode. And I don't know, I feel like nothing can be more relevant right now because we have changing things happening when it comes to outside of Islam. So we have people doing things not necessarily anti-Islam or anything, but they're doing some things that are just, making us uncomfortable as believers. And then we have people within Islam who are doing something that is just making us really uncomfortable as believers. And then we have things that are like attacking us from the outside from an Islamophobic and bigoted perspective. So I feel like society is changing so quickly, and it's very hard and also very important to know what are some steps that we have taken to deal with these changes.
Yeah, it's really easy to feel alone in all of that and feel very isolated, especially living in an area or a country where you don't feel a sense of togetherness or you don't have a sense of community. So this is why we decided to just explore this topic as a conversation between us.
I could say, have anything happened to you? You don't have to share the instance, but has things happened to you where you have felt, like you're alone?
Yeah, absolutely. All the time, in fact. I know that because when I don't feel alone, I can notice it and see, I don't feel like I'm the outsider. So yeah, it happens a lot. Especially if I haven't been to, say, mosque or anything. Our mosque is an hour away, so getting there isn't always easy, especially with traffic. But if I haven't gone there for a while, I can feel so just alone, like I'm the only one in this world just living here. What about you?
I think I would have to say within the Muslims sometimes, and also in general. And I've talked openly about where I live and stuff like that. So absolutely, it feels, it's really rare to see a Muslim and going outside. Much rather to meet one. And so I think it's a regular occurrence in work, in my husband's job as well. It's like the same things. It does feel a little bit that, you're like the weird one or the different one, or I don't know. It just feels like you're like an outsider. Basically.
Especially when, when the people around me are doing something which then I don't do, and that makes it like I'm a bit extra strange. You know what I mean? So before recording this, Samia and I spoke about how things that we see being done outside are the things that, we as believers, we don't really engage in. I guess the things that we do aren't always as accepted outside and aren't considered the things to do. Do you know what I mean?
Totally. That's like the entire conversation's happening. And, I really do want to mention that these conversations are obviously happening in society at large, and they're also happening within the Muslim community. There's some things that are coming forward where I do feel a little uncomfortable, and I do want to stay quiet because it's not my place to talk about it. And that in itself creates this little feeling inside of me which I don't know how to deal with. Because I feel like, we as Muslims together, we need to grow together, but at the same time, some things are just so blatant that staying quiet is the best thing you can do. I think overall, though, what really helps to go through these situations is knowing who we are. We're not following just any religion. We're not following a religion that someone just made up. Like there's so many religions out there right now. People just literally make them up and they have like thousands of following. But we have like, how many billions? 1.2 billion Muslims. I think that's the latest count or something. And that's a huge group of people to be following one thing. And that is a miracle in itself, And we follow a religion which is coming straight from Allah. And that's just, we have to, I think, take some pride in that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not really easy to feel good all the time, especially in the circumstances today. But you're right. Just thinking about really what has Allah given us. And it's actually such a blessing because it really helps us go through life in general. And, what kind of Lord is Allah? It's really humbling, to be honest, because I've been reading about the prophets, and one thing I realized is that actually the tests are the same, and the minority is in the victorious is always the minority, and none of the prophets actually had a big group following them. So it was always just a few people, and they were strange people to the outsiders. So I often think that the tests are the same. It's just the generation's different, the time is different, and it doesn't make me feel that alone. Then,
Right, that we're part of this web in history where if we were to
we're
go
not
back
the
in
only
time,
ones. Yeah,
we would just
Yeah.
talk about the same things.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's been going on since the beginning of time.
Right.
Like even the Prophet ﷺ was different,
Mm-hmm.
right? In that place that he was, around everything that was going on, he stood out as a different one because he was doing different things in a different way. When people just called him like a madman and all of that. That makes me
And
so
I
sad.
remember, reading about Musa alayhi salam and how he was so dignified, and so in that way as well, they just were dignified people and they stood out, and the people in authority were threatened by them because they knew that these people have some character that is going to attract others.
Also like Prophet Nuh, he spent 950 years preaching to his people, and approximately he gained one follower every 12 years. Can you
Jeez.
imagine doing that for 12 years and getting one person? Someone like me would just give up. Be like, Allah, this is really not working. But that is not the point, But he put in so much effort, and that was his mission. Even if one person is guided, that was his mission, and he put in the effort and the sincerity because it's not about the result, it's about what you do.
A lot of the times I find myself thinking, falling in that line that, oh, there's so many people who have come into my life, and oh, they have not seen Islam yet, and you just have to remind yourself that this is really, like you said, that's not the purpose. The purpose is just to live it, and you give the message to the best of your ability. But I feel like we're kind of getting away from the topic today. We're talking about the changing of society and how we can manage ourselves with that change. And I know we talked about, that feeling okay with being different, I guess, and really learning about the prophets, as you said, and looking at their challenges. And also what really helps, I think, is just becoming closer to Allah and really knowing our faith. So me and you both, we're both hijabis, and I know some of our listeners are as well. And we're visible when we go outside. It's like a visible difference. And sometimes I know when I'm walking into a grocery store, it's like it's an obvious thing that I notice people are suddenly kind of like, just for a second they will look, and so you can see the air has changed a little bit. Maybe if I was a little bit uncertain, I don't know why I was doing what I was doing, maybe I didn't know my faith too much, then I would feel a little bit hesitant, or I would feel like I'm standing out. But I don't feel this way in this regard because I am confident in what I'm doing and that it is pleasing to Allah and that I am doing the right thing. And so it really doesn't bother me. I actually expect people to accept me. I go in and I'm like, yeah, I expect you to respect the way that I'm dressed, my convictions, who I am, regardless of what your personal preference is. And so in that way, I'm not bothered, but in other ways, I think still, I feel like I have to be quiet sometimes even though I know that what I believe in is accurate, but just to maintain a surrounding environment of peace, I have to be quiet.
Yes, completely relate to that. Yep. I loved what you said, that, in our faith, everything also has a reason, and that you're certain of the reason that certain things exist. So everything that we do, we are certain that Allah has it for a reason, because our faith is a very holistic faith. And so personally, whenever I'm confused about something, the first thing that I think is, no, there is an answer. I don't know it, and that's okay, but there is an answer, because Allah has an answer. Allah's put it in this place because of something. I just need to dig for it. And obviously, as we spoke about as well before, getting that information from the right sources is so important, especially now where there's so much information going around as well.
I remember this one time when I was beginning to learn Islam from my, I guess, adult perspective. And I remember talking to my mother. There were a lot of confusion between religion and culture, as we're very well familiar with. And so I had some questions about the rights of women and the experiences of women. And obviously it was coming from a very cultural background, because a lot of the things didn't make any sense to me. And I asked my mom about something, and she told me, she was like, Samia, I asked her something about why are the women, this idea about women, why is it addressed this way in the Quran, right? Or why does Islam say it this way? And she was like, Samia, this is a very disrespectful approach, basically. You don't want to say, why is it this way? Well, your approach should be, I don't understand right now. Let me find out a little bit more. Maybe this is something that I will understand a few years down the road, maybe not right now. And that is so important, because if I was to go to some other person, they'd be like, yeah, you're right. Sometimes we just want a yes man. We want someone to always agree. We don't want someone to be like, hang on, let's research and let's find out if we are accurate or not.
Yeah, we fuel one another in that. It's quite scary where it can lead to, but that is such a good approach, that I don't understand this right now, but let me look into it and let me see what it's really about. It's actually so good. That's a good approach to deal with anything, really. How have you personally dealt with some of these differences that you've felt? Or how do you feel like we can deal with it?
At the end of season 1, I mentioned some of the lessons that I had learned, and one of them was understanding that we are the least important person in attendance, I guess. Like, I am the least important person in the group, especially when we're looking at people with different views and opinions. And even though I know in my heart that what I'm doing or what I'm believing right now in this topic is something that Islam endorses, in which Allah has taught us, I still have to be very respectful of the other people's views. And respect doesn't just come with saying, I respect you. It just really comes in your mannerisms and in your character, in the way that, when they're speaking, how is it that I'm speaking with them? Am I valuing their words, even if they're completely off the chart as far as Islamic standards are concerned? So I think just respecting the people with different views and opinions, truly respecting them, honoring them even, because they are Allah's creation, and their words and experiences are they're worth it. They're not useless. Their experiences are something that I can even learn from, even though I might disagree with them. And so respecting them coming from that perspective, I think is important, and it helps to deal with these silly things sometimes.
So we've also said knowing your faith is a really important one as well. The other thing that I find very beneficial is to have some sort of a support network. So being in the presence of people, whether it's online or offline, people to come back to and discuss the confusions with, discuss the experiences with. So coming back to these kind of people who can encourage you and remind you of what's important and talk it through with you, make you feel a bit lighter and a bit more positive about where we are right now. It's really easy to feel disconnected sometimes and alone, because for me, for example, when I'm praying in my house, sometimes I just don't feel like anyone else is praying. And all of a sudden, when I go to the mosque, like I said before, I see everyone praying in congregation and I think, wow, we're all praying. That's it's so refreshing to my heart, because I forget that other people are praying as well. I'm not alone. Like, I can be praying in my house, but we're all praying. And then that makes me think about everyone everywhere else in all other countries that are praying. And I think, yeah, we're not alone. It's just we don't have that immediate community always. And for those that have it, that's amazing.
It's kind of like we have, like addiction centers, or where they have groups that come in and they really just talk about their things and support each other. And that's one of the key things to get out of the addictions. And when we talk about in our community, when we have converts coming in, it's like really important to have a support network for the converts. I think we should extend that towards just us too, that we do need a support network, especially with the things that are going around nowadays. And we really need to support each other and just respect each other's views when we're together.
Yeah, definitely. And build one another up and, grow towards Allah together. And I personally find that the support network really helps here, because you might think that your approach is the most correct, but getting insight from other people from an outside perspective can really help shape that.
The book I read, I talk about that, I think, probably in the last season as well, about the beginning of guidance. Is one of my favorite books. And Imam Ghazali in there actually says, the idea that you're the least important person. And he goes a little bit deeper and giving you, he's like, if you still don't, I love how it's approached sometimes. It's very sarcastic. And, it's like, if you still don't understand what I'm talking about, imagine this scenario where you're with a young child and he's saying something that really upsets you or offends you, or something that is absolutely inaccurate. You have to think maybe they'll grow up and they will be a believer one day, and they will be like the imam one day, or an older person that they will one day come to realization what Islam is and they will accept it. So everybody has has an opportunity until they die to see the truth for what it is. And we cannot sit here and judge a person or sit here and have a conversation where you're demeaning the other person, because you don't know where their status would be. Most likely, you're not going to see them before they die, So having that respect and this idea that, that person is very valuable and honorable and is bringing something into my life which makes me grow is really something pivotal.
Yes, respect is just fundamental for any kind of relationship. You're so right. That's the first thing I started noticing. I think that's the first quality I started noticing in people: respect. And in couples and relationships, that's definitely coming from a place of respect and openness as well, to let the other person be heard.
I want to revisit something that I said earlier. I talked about that sometimes it is best to stay quiet, and I still hold that. You have to be the judge to when it is time to be quiet. But I do want to say that there is a time that you have to speak up. Being quiet is not always the best option, especially if it is happening, let's say, in a public setting, at work setting, or where something is happening which is making you feel just uncomfortable. The idea of going through the changes is not about complacency, about being just trampled upon. It's about going through it with dignity and holding your honor intact, and honor of the ummah basically intact. And so, yeah, I think there is a time to be quiet, but there's also a time where you have to stand up and be like, okay, I need to do something. What can I do, and how can I do it in the best possible way?
So something that I feel like I take from a lot of these encounters is, if I'm feeling uncertain about something, that reminds me to look into that and explore why I'm feeling uncertain about that particular thing, why I'm feeling uncomfortable about that thing. Maybe I don't know enough, maybe I haven't looked into it. So taking that as an opportunity to become stronger in it is something, inshallah, that I want to try and remind myself to do more.
I love the discussion we had today, Qudsiyah, about how to dealing with these things. And I feel like the discussion is going to be happening in many different households for years to come, because a lot of things are changing really quickly. And it's really important for us to get together and really know what Islam is, or how it's supposed to make us feel, and what does it require us to do as far as living in this world right now. We always like to end the podcast by giving you something to think about, and if you feel like it, then we'd love to hear about that as well from you. And so today I really want you to think about the society that we're living in, what you are experiencing, how is it making you feel, and if there are any moments where you have reached this understanding on how to deal with that specific situation that you were in, some tips or something that you think is going to help all of our listeners and ourselves manage these situations better, it would be great for you to share that with us.
If there's something that you've benefited from today, we'll be so grateful if you'd share it with someone you know. It would help us out a lot if you'd review it on your favorite app and also subscribe to the podcast. You can contact us at Soulful Latte Podcast on Instagram and write to us at soulfullattepodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep growing.